Ladies and gentlemen, pay attention. This is your boy, the coach from the WWE. I would like to welcome you to the very first wrestling podcast in the world to take you on a weekly deep dive into classic matches along with legends of the squared circle. Enjoy the discussion. Enjoy the back and forth. There's so much to get into. Ladies and gentlemen, this is The Payoff.
CM Punk. Welcome to an all-new episode of The Payoff. I'm Tom. That's Jeff. Jeff, how the hell are you doing?
It's a busy week for wrestling, man. We've got it's full, road to full gear. It's at the end of this weekend, and very excited. This week, I am back to a live wrestling show. This is the week, and so I am going to be spending Wednesday evening at AEW. And so you and I said it before that we were done paying for WWE tickets, at least like the weekly shows. So AEW it is. I will be on the row, fourth row. I'm excited to be there.
So you'll be on TV. You'll be in the prime seat.
I haven't picked my shirt yet, which is a little upsetting. And so it's a big deal. And so I need to be seen, but I don't care if there's a little kid sitting next to me. I've never sat on the rail. And so I am pumped to sit on the rail.
What are you deciding between Cena or Reigns?
Yeah, you know me, buddy. Yeah, absolutely. Or Brock. I always got my Brock shirt. And so I do have an Adam Cole shirt. I also have a Jurassic Express shirt, but like all wrestling shirts, they're black. And so I had really hoped for, something a little bit brighter for the day to stand out. You and I know how this works, but you can't buy a wrestling shirt that's not black, I feel like. So we're just going to have to see what happens. So,
well, you'll let us know. I'm looking forward to seeing you on TV. It should be a good show.
It should be. Yep, absolutely.
What was the last wrestling show you attended live?
Jesus. I actually think it would have been a house show, an AEW house show. I could actually go back and let you know here as we're kind of talking. But yeah, so there was an AEW Dynamite. It would have been November 2019.
You went to that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't even remember that.
Yeah, I was. That was when I remember Billy Gunn was like in a main event or something like that. So it was November 2019 was the last wrestling show I was at. So I'm overdue. It's time.
2 short years, we've gone from Billy Gunn main eventing to CM Punk and Bryan Danielson and Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho. And
this was pre Rampage. Yep. And so
that roster is just stupid.
That's part of what I'm excited for is the crowds are always hot. It's full gear week. It's the go home Dynamite. I'm more than ready to experience this. And even when I was there, in 2019, they were still really getting their feet wet and it was pre-pandemic, but now we're ready for it. I'm ready for it.
So any main reason why we're covering this, or is it just because of who they are?
It's just really who they are. I think that was the thing is you and I had said hey, let's just drop a show in here and see who we can get. I think especially with, and we may refer to it. We know it's Bryan Danielson. It's the American Dragon. We may say Daniel Bryan. Don't freak out. We know who we're talking about here. That between him and CM Punk, really just kind of going back and seeing some of their original stuff. We always hear about it, but to have a match with these guys really so long ago, and just kind of, them both being on AEW now, we've only heard positive coming from that. Why not? Let's check it out. Some of this old stuff and see what's happening and see what's going on.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into the build.
Oh, it's time for the build.
So I'm not a big ROH guy. Didn't really see much of it. What about you?
I've been to one show and then a lot of clips that my brother has sent me because my brother is a Ring of Honor stan, if you will. And so some of the big storylines with, Adam Cole leaving Ring of Honor before he came to WWE, things like that. I know a lot of this stuff. And then I saw a show. It was a War of the World show with New Japan in Dearborn, Michigan, in a gym with probably about 1,000 of us, if that. That was the extent of what I've seen. Yep.
Interesting. I know so many of the guys that have come through there, but admittedly, I've watched this is probably the first match I've ever watched of Ring of Honor. And I know it's horrible, but so I mean, we have, ROH really came around at a time where indie wrestling was down, and you had TNA and you had WWE, and that's really it. So there wasn't anything else. So, interesting timing. And of course, a lot of the ECW faithful probably gravitated towards it as well. So I look forward to digging into this. I definitely want to see more of it. Interesting card. It's ROH Reborn, April 23rd, 2004, the St. Paul Armory. So there's 500 people at this place. I mean, imagine being, I've been to some smaller shows, but imagine this quality of wrestling on a smaller show.
It's a gym. Like that's really what it boils down to is, so, when you're thinking like, it's like 500 people, it's Ring of Honor is in a, like, it's a gym or like a big convention room. That's it. Yep.
So some interesting names on the show: Matt Stryker, Nigel McGuinness, Cole Cabana, Alex Shelley, Matt Siddell, the Briscoe
Just Incredible.
Brothers. Yep. Just Incredible. And then
Samoa Joe. Yep.
And then the main event, Samoa Joe defeating Homicide. And not that long ago, Homicide was on AEW. I just know nothing about this guy, but I mean, got a massive pop at Arthur Ashe.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. They've been around. And so that's something else too that people don't realize. And we'll talk about it too. Homicide comes up again in some of this because he's been around. Absolutely.
It's just interesting too, Jeff, because it's like, I know with the Performance Center, like the narrative is, WWE's making their own stars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, Seth Rollins was, Tyler Black. They didn't make him.
Yep.
They didn't make Moxley. They didn't make Adam Cole. They didn't make Cesaro.
And I have a list of,
It's just so interesting that like at all these different stages, it's like, Hulk Hogan was a made man before he got to New York.
Yep.
People don't realize that. Hulkamania, I mean, Vince McMahon didn't really create it. I mean, Macho Man was the Macho Man. Warrior was the Warrior. I mean, so it's just so interesting that in all these different stages, you look at these guys and Daniel Bryan. I mean, all WWE did was slap a stupid ass name on him. I mean, right? He was already Punk was, these guys were already stars. They didn't do anything. I mean, they just plucked them in. They changed a few things. They created a new gimmick in some cases to own the IP, but it's just like, I don't know. Samoa Joe. I mean, what's WWE done to make Samoa Joe better or more interesting? Nothing, of course. Right. So I don't know. It's just always funny. You look at ROH or you look at ECW or you look at the AWA back in the day, and so much of the WWE stars were already made men prior to getting to the main roster, and in a lot of cases, they only ruined the gimmick or hurt the gimmick. Mm-hmm. I mean, what the hell were they going to do with Adam Cole?
Some of the rumors were,
my God.
Whatever you believe, are bad.
And here's the thing. Typically these rumors, and obviously not everything you read is true, but most of the time they're either true or pretty close to true. It's like what they were going to do with FTR.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, how did we get to these two in the ring together?
Yeah, so this one's interesting. Like Tom said, Ring of Honor had not been around for that long at this point. And so we'll kind of, like I said, there's not much of a, story itself, but just kind of a little background on kind of where these guys were at and kind of where they were coming from. So it was actually 2002. Daniel Bryan had actually wrestled a couple matches for WWE, but he was not under contract at this point. Losing both of those matches, it was actually Deshaun O'Hare and Little Guido Nunzio. And so, and taking the loss there. So that was 2002. 2003, he came back. He actually had 4 matches on between Velocity and Heat. And so, really, and then, enhancement talent for all these. And so in 2003, he wrestled Jamie Noble at a Velocity taping. He wrestled Rico at a Heat taping in February. And then John Cena at a Velocity taping also in February. And then the final appearance was a tag team match where he was partnered with John Walters and then beating Paul London and Spanky at the Velocity taping, Spanky also being known as Brian Kendrick. And so
these Velocity tapings were the place to be,
apparently. And so that was really the last time that he was in WWE for, about 4 or 5 years before he, came back. But at the time, it was one of those where I always enjoy seeing like the videos where they show the guy working as the security guard, like MJF or something like that, 4 or 5 years before he gets his break and something like that. So it's always funny to see that stuff, But so 2002, it was actually Daniel Bryan being one of, if you will, the founding fathers of Ring of Honor, and kind of helping to start that company. So the company's debut event, it was the Era of Honor Begins. He was this was February 2002. He was in the main event. And again, we're gonna talk a lot about names that have made a lot for themselves. It was a 3-way match between Christopher Daniels and Loki, and a match that Daniel Bryan ended up losing this one. And so, he had really been he was one of the founders of Ring of Honor. He had been there, just really kind of establishing self, kind of having matches and things like that. So CM Punk, though, this, goes back to, we knew that, even before the lawsuit and everything, his kind of long-standing relationship and friendship with Colt Cabana. It was actually their matches between the two of them where CM Punk getting hired by Ring of Honor because that. And so he actually made his debut. It was the Ring of Honor All-Star Extravaganza, November 9th, 2002. He was in a gauntlet match that had, it was 5 participants, and the match was actually won by, American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. So the American Dragon, he beat the Amazing Red, CM Punk, Michael Shane, and Paul London. And so a few big names in there and kind of what was happening. And so you had Punk initially coming in as a face and then ended up turning heel. It was actually a feud with former guest of the podcast and the Payoff and friend of the Payoff. He always retweets us every single time, Raven. Punk having a few run-ins with Raven.
And I heard that was an awesome feud.
And that's another one too. Yeah. And so I did add that to our list as well. And so big fan of Raven around here. Great guy. And so the storyline on that one, it was actually Punk's, we always know like the kind of straight edge lifestyle, the kind of, he leads versus Raven, they brought into the storyline, Raven's, I say his alcoholic father, really this was, it lasted most of 2003. And this was really the top feud of 2003 in Ring of Honor. And so they finally had a match. It was at the conclusion, November 2003. Actually, Punk beat Raven in a steel cage match. That's actually the match I have on our list for a future day. And so maybe we'll get Raven to talk about that one as well too. And so, really cool to kind of, just a long rivalry with those guys. And so after that, like Punk really, had established himself. He had been in the league I got football on in the background. Been around for quite a while. And so you also had it was the tournament for the first Ring of Honor Pure Championship, and CM Punk actually losing that to AJ Styles.
Had no idea he was ever in ROH. Did you?
Yep. And so briefly, yep. And so you've got that. That would have been one of their anniversary or second anniversary shows, and them having that. And so, but he did win the Ring of Honor Tag Team Championship actually a few times with Colt Cabana. At the time, they were called the Second City Saints, them beating the Briscoe brothers. And so, I'd say the American Dragon and, CM Punk did not have a ton of like run-ins prior to this. Both were very well established in regards to, what they were doing, the interactions they were having, things like that. So, we're going to watch this match, but one thing you'll notice right away is, and why actually part of the reason that I was drawn to this match too, is we have a special guest referee in the form of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. And so Ricky the Dragon actually kind of looking at it, he would actually was under contract. That Ring of Honor Pure Championship with AJ Styles and Punk, Steamboat actually refereed that one as well too. He actually it was part of the storyline with Punk, again, with the, kind of straight edge things like that, because what happened and how they kind of played it out in Ring of Honor was that Steamboat was upset over Punk's arrogance, because Steamboat had refereed a few different matches just in regards to like how he was acting, like, he's better than he was. But Steamboat really it was actually a good use of a legend, if you will, of Steamboat trying to convince him, hey, you can be better than you are. Don't be this way, prove that, you're a better wrestler than you think you are. Act like it. And so again, we talk a lot around here about like proper use of legends. Like it feels weird to say that Steamboat, carried part of this storyline for them. I saw some mixed things. Of one, it was because of the storyline which is why, and he had been involved in a little bit of this with CM Punk, which is why he was the referee of this one. I also saw in a couple places that he was just under contract and trying to get some dates in on this one. And so him refereeing counted as an appearance. And so he was able to use that and, complete some of his contract. Not that he was upset from what I could tell. It's just, you got a contract to fulfill and we got to make it happen. So, but again, you figure great signing, at the time, if you got the Ricky the Dragon Steamboat involved with you, and we're going to talk about a feud he had after as well, too, like good things happening.
Love it. Yeah. I love a good use of the legends. And, again, it gets guys like us to pay attention or maybe take a look at something. And it's no different than, when we were growing up and some of the guys that I didn't know. You bring, when they had like Bruno Sammartino on commentary, well, it meant nothing to me, but to, people in their 40s and 50s, it was probably pretty damn cool.
Yep, absolutely.
Like I'm just such a big proponent of it, and it's not hard to use them right. Arn Anderson in AEW, Jake Roberts, Steamboat when he came back and did a few matches in WWE. I mean, there's so many examples of how you can do it, and it gives guys the rub. You can do both too. I think sometimes people think like, oh, the only way you should use legend is they should come in and they should put a younger guy over. Well, you can do it in a way where guys get rubs, right? Yep. I mean, it's okay if, was Chris Jericho's career going to be ruined if, God forbid, Ricky Steamboat chopped him a few times? Yep. I mean, all right. Yeah. Well, let's jump into this one. We'll post the YouTube clip. The clip we're looking at, it's CM Punk versus Bryan Danielson. ? And
we're not pirating. This is on Ring of Honor Wrestling's YouTube page.
That's right. It's got 387,000 views. So let's jump into it. Are you ready?
I believe I am. Let's get into this one, man.
All right. It's time for the payoff.
Oh, it's time for the payoff.
Bryan looking a little bit younger, but kind of the same physique, huh? And then you got
it should Seth go back to he's had the blonde streaks before, but this is very blonde. Are you feeling Punk with the blonde?
Did you call him Seth?
I did, because
Seth Rollins.
He does look like Seth. I know.
Dude, yeah.
Are you feeling the Punk blonde? Is what I meant to say.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it was, but that was this is kind of the look he had when he came to WWE. He's got like gym shorts, boxing short kind of things on with Punk on him. And
did you happen to follow? It would have been a few weeks at this point, but the trunks versus pants argument that was happening with CM Punk.
I'm assuming that people did not like the trunks or the pants he wore.
Correct. Yes. They wanted trunks, CM Punk. Yep. So you got both guys.
It didn't bother me. I mean, I kind of, to be honest with you, I kind of liked a different look. I mean, I think he looks better in trunks than in the pants, but I like the idea of a new look and doing that. I'll tell you, like, one of the things that, like, with, Bryan Danielson, he's in AEW, he's wearing the same attire that he wore in WWE. And I'm like, man, change up your colors, do something a little bit different. It's a new era. I'll give you another example. I'm not a fan of the fact that Edge basically is doing the exact same gimmick as he did 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Rated R superstar. I mean, and I guess they say, oh, well, there's equity in that, in that brand or in that name. But I'm like, like, why wouldn't you try to do something a little bit different? Change up his gear a little bit. It's a different era. So I'm not a fan of the exact same thing, especially if you're a full timer. Now, if you're Goldberg and you're coming back for a match, yeah, you do the look and the music and all that. That's fine.
So, and this is, so you got both kind of slow playing it here. You got, Punk screwing around on the outside, yelling at the fans and things like that. Not much happening. Steamboat yelling at him.
Let me just tell you from a production standpoint, I like this look, which is basically like you see the first couple rows of people and then you see nothing.
The black.
And for the sake of it being such a small venue, I like that because, I mean, what are you going to see? You're going to see like bleachers in the back. You're going to see like the fact that it's like an empty, shitty building. So I like the idea of it being completely blacked out, the spotlights on the wrestlers. Now, if you had 20,000 people there, you'd produce it a little bit differently. But I don't mind this kind of gritty look. I mean, it looks good. Yeah, focused on the wrestlers, and it's pretty good quality.
Well, and I remember when we did the World of Honor show, or the World show, excuse me. This was, again, it was a gym, like in a city, like community center. And it was like, you had just the folding chairs, about 5-10 rows of those. And then you had one row of like those like rolling bleachers. That's about 5 rows high. And that was it. Like it didn't go any higher than that. And so like that's the type of venue I'm sure this is in too. But it's deceiving. You would never know that because of the blackout and stuff like that. I'm just noticing too, I like the split color ring too. I don't know why, but I'm a fan. It's different. Yep. And so you and I talk about it. So I do have a list here of some of the best superstars who were Ring of Honor, who are also, Ring of Honor champions. And so working down the list at this point, I'm going to start at the top actually, with they getting into Cesaro, spending some time in Ring of Honor, being the champ there. Roderick Strong as well too, had a great run actually. Also the tag team championships as well too, with Austin Aries. You had Samoa Joe, another big name coming out of there. Seth Rollins, of course. Sorry, mixing them up, but Seth Rollins as well too. Having some time, like you said, different name, but we'll cover one of his matches.
Did you watch did we talk about this yet? The Austin Rollins interview?
We haven't talked about it on the air. We talked about it off the show, but yeah, go for it.
It was great. And, here's the thing. Look, I've said this before. I'll say it again. Here's the issue. He's a way more interesting, cooler, fascinating person in real life than the stupid ass character he plays on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Like, tell me if I'm wrong on this. Like, when did Mick Foley get over? Really get over with the audience? He got over when he did the interview and he said, yeah, I wanted to be Shawn Michaels' heartthrob guy when I was growing up and I jumped off my roof. And, that's when he got over because there was a connection, a real person connection. And I'm not saying you can't have characters. You can't have an Undertaker. You can't have a Bray Wyatt. Of course you can. But if you don't have some crazy ass out there character, then just call it what it is. The guy's name is, I think it's Colby Lopez. Okay. The guy's name is Colby. He lives in the middle of Iowa. He's a cool ass guy. And guess what? He's likable. He's worked his ass off. He went to the wrestling schools. He drove 6 hours round trip to train. He slept in his car. Like that's a character. That's someone I can get behind. And then you say, well, what if we want to make him a heel? Well, you make him a heel. You say, look, I'm not doing this for the fans. I'm doing this for myself. And then he does dastardly things. How hard is this? Bryan Danielson, when he got over, it was just the guy, the underdog, not getting pushed by the company, B player. That was all legitimate. You know his wife, you know his story, you know who he is, you connect to him. Shawn Michaels comes back from retirement. Hey, the guy's cleaned up his act. He's, a born-again Christian. He wants to redeem himself. He's going to, go out there and give his all and prove he still has it. It's the real life. Steve Austin turned up to a 10. That was who he was. So I watch these people, the Lashleys and the Rollins and all these current guys go on Austin's podcast, and every time I have the same impression. I knew none of this, or most of it I didn't know. It's fascinating, And it's far more interesting than the scripted bullshit I'm watching on television. Why is it so difficult? Why can't we just call a spade? Why can't we just say Roman Reigns, he played football at Georgia Tech. He's a badass with an incredible lineage. And here's his real name. It's fucking Joe. So let's call him Joe.
Well, and it's very, go ahead.
And I know some of it gets into the trademark issues, but you can, give him a nickname. Joe the Animal. Okay, well, we own the animal gimmick. Just like, WWE
Bearcat
owns the Yes Chance. Just like
Keith Lee Bearcat. Stone Cold. Yep.
Stone Cold. They own all the IP.
Yeah, and we had real technical slowdown match at this point too. Both guys kind of, mat wrestling and things happening. I think it's really interesting because too, how much praise did they get when, what was it, that hour at Mania when they were delayed and they had to
just cut off the cuff promos.
Right, exactly. And kind of dealing with that. And that is when they got showered with praise because people just were able to cut a promo. And some people it worked and some people it didn't. But then for a lot, it worked incredibly well. Like Kevin Owens, shocker. Like Kevin Owens has an incredible promo. It going over really well with stuff like that. But then you get in these situations, like you said, where they're trying to get us to buy into something that just we have no desire to buy into. And so, I know you're one of your favorites, Mandy Rose, why? What are they doing? Kind of NXT, it was nice. Braun Breaker is going to be, is going to be the star there, it seems like, and how they're making that. But that's the other thing too, that you and I have not talked about is how, the draft. How can you, years and years of watching drafts and seeing drafts and really having no clue how to conduct a draft. Zero hype, nothing.
Yeah. I've been watching drafts for years, but the drafts I watch are the NFL, MLB, NBA, right? Yep. And they all fucking make sense because they're an actual draft.
Yep.
What is this bullshit? Some years we have the draft lottery, then we have the draft. I mean, look, the separate brand thing, the funny part is the separate brand thing has zero value. The only thing you could argue is that because there's a Raw brand and a SmackDown brand, somehow they were able to generate a higher TV deal because they're quote unquote two distinct properties. You look at Dynamite and Rampage. Am I correct in saying that Dynamite and Rampage really are just a 3-hour AEW show on a weekly basis with 2 hours on Wednesday and 1 hour on Friday?
Yeah, it's an extension.
Continuation of the same characters, the same storylines. You can argue Dynamite's a little bit better, but there's also times you can tell they're we're just going to put the best match of the week on Rampage, or do something. So to me, it's just a 3. So if I'm WWE, I'm looking at that and I'm going, man, wouldn't it be nice to just have a 5-hour story throughout the week? We do 3 and then we do 2, and SmackDown builds to Raw and Raw builds to SmackDown. And then they both build to the pay-per-views. And to me, it would just be a far better cadence. Now, is 3 hours better than 5? Of course. But I'm just saying, given that we have 5 hours and it is what it is, I would just rather one big ass roster. And you don't know who you're going to get. You don't know who's going to show up. You have way more options. And your biggest stars, your Roman Reigns, look what AEW's done so well. A lot of these guys, they're getting on both shows. Punk does commentary. Well, why? Maybe you have, Roman Reigns do commentary on one of the shows, or cuts a brief promo in front of the audience, right?
Your biggest stars on AEW are doing that.
But they're also not oversaturating them.
Yep.
Now that could change, but I'm not it's too much Punk or it's too much Sting or it's too much Jericho. It's not. They're doing a really good job, and WWE could do the same thing, because if you look at Raw and SmackDown and you combine those rosters, it's a really good wrestling roster. Is it as good as AEW? Well, no, I think AEW's far better right now in all aspects. But my point is you could create a really great 5 hours of television on a weekly basis. But because they do this separation, then you have 2 shitty tag divisions, you have 2 shitty women's divisions, and you don't have any matchups. So, like, what are you supposed to do? I mean, how many great women's matchups do you have if you split the roster in half? Now we'll see Becky and Charlotte way too much, and we'll see, Bianca and someone else way too much. And it just, it's so frustrating. But I see no value in the brand split unless you say, that's the only way we can get these massive TV deals. Now, what I would argue is USA and Fox, they'd be happier if they both had Roman Reigns and they both had Lashley and they both had Big E and they both had McIntyre and they were showing up for both.
Well, and so
they'd be way happier.
I think it's no longer like a Raw and SmackDown thing for me. I've had this realization over the last couple of weeks, actually, especially before the draft. And they had to tell that, it's between Fox and USA at this point. That's the competition because they wanted to know who was getting drafted where. And Fox said they really want Charlotte. Okay, well, that's that. And Roman's not going Roman. If you're going to treat now SmackDown's the A show because it's on Fox, Roman's not going anywhere. And so
then make that the storyline then.
Yeah. And
that's actually interesting to me. But that, that, then I'm like, oh, okay, that's actually kind of interesting.
And so big suplex there from Punk to Bryan to the outside. Yeah, we both seen that. Yeah, so it's been a good match.
Legitimately have Fox executive on there in USA. I mean, I'd be like, oh, okay, this is somewhat interesting, I guess. But I just don't understand. The brand split makes sense if you need to do 2 separate loops of house shows. I don't think we're ever going back to 6 house shows a week. Maybe I'm wrong, but why would you? So you make 2 touring crews. Hey, on this crew, it's headed by Roman Reigns is coming to your town. This crew, Drew McIntyre is coming to your town. You don't need 2 separate. You just say, here's the guys that are announced for this show. And if you're a massive Big E fan and he's not on your show, then maybe you don't go.
Well, and I think, and also with it, people were talking over them making the announcements. You were getting the what chant. They made the rules so convoluted. It's well, you can only draft certain people, but we didn't know who you could draft when.
Who gives a shit about Adam Pearce and Sonya Deville?
Which fine, behind the scenes, let them keep doing. They get they get the weekly. They've approved the match this week. It's okay. To be honest, I rather would have seen Stephanie out there or something like that, or Triple H making those announcements.
My favorite authority figure is exactly what they're doing with Tony Khan right now.
Yep.
He is calling the shots. He is the storyline explanation for everything that happens, but you don't have to see him. He's not in the ring. He's not cutting stupid scripted promos. He's not getting roughed up in fake fights. You just keep him away. And for years they did it with Jack Tunney. I
was going to say, do you bring back a Gorilla or a Jack Tunney?
Yes.
Lie to us.
Or you just say Vince McMahon's calling all the fucking shots.
Which we know he is anyway.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with saying, and at Crown Jewel, we have Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns. It's just been made official by Vince McMahon. Why wouldn't you do that? And maybe he cuts a couple promos a year on TV. But if I'm sitting there as a viewer and I know it's all fake, but I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, that makes sense. On AEW, when they do that stuff, Danielson, Omega, they're next week at Arthur Ashe. You know what I'm thinking? Oh, well, that would make sense that Tony Khan does that because I know he's the owner of the company and I know he's the fucking booker.
Well, and part of it, the problem too, is AEW's matches in regards to storyline we're seeing makes sense. They're these guys were arguing on Wednesday night, so they're going to have a match on Friday night. Oh, okay. So you don't need someone like Tony Khan to say, on screen to approve that. It's part of the bigger problem with WWE is it's, how many times, even in the last few weeks, we said Vince ripped up the script Monday afternoon. It's how do you not there's just no long-term story building at all anymore. And it's because it's the one-man show. It's Vince doing that. I feel he's surrounded by yes men.
We have a 73-year-old crazy ass man in the back that's moving guys to different rosters. That's, creating all these matches. He can be a heel, he can be a baby face, he can go back and forth. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
I mean, Vince is still, keep in mind, Vince is the greatest heel in the history of professional wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone knows him. He's not going anywhere. You own his likeness. He's not jumping to AEW. He can be a character without being a character. You can mention Vince McMahon on every episode of Raw and SmackDown. Hey, just made official. Charlotte is defending her title in a steel cage per Vince McMahon.
Yeah. And that's all you got to leave it as. Yep.
If you need to show him in the back, he's at every show. If you need to, get him to cut a promo, he can.
My favorite hot take on the draft, actually, I'm interested in what you're going to think of this. I saw it on Reddit, was Pat McAfee has actually done a very good job on commentator. He's going over really well. Have Pat McAfee do like a Mel Kiper role and do like an after the pick or something like that. Like kind of have him, get all hyped like Mel Kiper does and talk about, on ESPN or, like what's going on or what is this guy's background. And you can actually tell a story that way of like, you know what, if you're going to do the draft, don't give me 2 hours of wrestling, do a draft, like do a true draft, put everybody in the arena. Like you could even, tape it somewhere, do it at the PC, do something like that and say, hey, and then you can record like McAfee or Cole or whoever, like kind of breaking down some of these guys, like had feuds previously with this person on the show or like, really, and very distinguished. Like I was confused after night one of like what belt was where and who was going what. And like, I didn't like it either that like people that should have been like, people that I wanted to get drafted weren't. But then you get Brock is like, I'm a free agent. It's like, okay, well, that makes sense because you're going to do whatever you want. They're going to put you on any show they want when they need to pop a rating. And so like, it's so like, it was probably for me the worst draft that we've had because they just like, it's like they don't know what to do. And part of it is, we've shit on WWE a lot on this one.
Well, you're right that the draft has gotten worse. That's for a few reasons. Number one is now it makes no sense. At least when you have Shane and Steph or Triple H and
brand supremacy. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I got it. There's two different sides and they're against each other. Okay. That actually makes sense. This made no sense. And not only does it make no sense, but it also looks really stupid when on TNT, AEW is doing everything that makes perfect logical sense. Wow, what a nice counter there. That is really good match. Are you a Punk heel fan or a face fan?
For me, like I probably face. Like I'll take him either way. But yeah, and so yeah. I think that like he goes over more that way. And so, or like gets over more that way, excuse me. And so not to say he's going over that way, but yeah, like absolutely. And so, yeah. And we haven't talked about it, but yeah, these guys have had a very good match. They are a lot of back and forth, a lot of very technical holds and things like that. But I won't even call it rest holds because they're really not. And so, but these guys physical on the outside, kind of really going at it. It's almost crazy how young they look too. Like you forget that they're babies at this point. Yeah.
Couple other things.
Yeah.
We're talking a lot about AEW's roster. Do you think at some point, and I don't know when it is, let's just say maybe like next year, that there will come a time where some guys are going to be underutilized, not happy, and WWE will throw them maybe more money and also what they feel is a better opportunity?
Absolutely. I think that's going to be one of the good parts of the market, if you will, that we will now start seeing is, like competition's healthy.
I mean, it's very one way right now.
Right. But that's what I was going to say. It's one way right now because of how it is, but the door's going to swing both ways on that. Like there's going to be people like we've seen, like even like Brian Cage isn't happy and stuff like that.
That's what prompted my thought on that was Brian Cage. And it's God, tell me Vince wouldn't want him. But yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah.
So that it's good. It's absolutely going to happen. Look, in business and in life, the grass is always greener. So,
yep.
Oh, so Punk's going for this. I had never seen, he had one of the Jackson brothers tap out to this like full Nelson. I don't even know what the hell it's called. But I had never seen it, and he's doing it right now.
Yep. That we've seen too. We heard them talking about an AEW, like Daniel Bryan, the cattle mutilator and stuff like that, like going for some of the rest. Like he's very technical. He was just never given the opportunity to do that because these guys have had each other kind of locked up. Just interesting. Yeah. How this one continues to play out. Right.
It's a hell of a match now. Started off slow, but it's a hell of a match.
And you had Steamboat kind of getting in Punk's face for a lot of it too at the early stages and kind of, somewhat being a factor, somewhat not, things like that. So that's really interesting to see as well too. How
stupid was the Daniel Bryan name?
Almost. Well, really, I mean, knowing what we know now, Vince wanted to own what he wanted to own.
I know, but then create another gimmick around it. But I mean, I don't. It's just. To me, it's just, I'm not watching, who's the quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Oh, it's, Buck Johnson.
Right.
It's Seth Fredrickson. And it's some fucking fake name. And I'm like, well, the guy's name's Tom Brady. He played football at Michigan. I follow him on Instagram, and his name's Tom Brady. I mean, these guys, it's like, it's so hard to, it's just, I don't know. I mean,
well, and I think it speaks to the nature of some of these people. I think Ruby Soho said it when she came over. Like, she did not think anyone was going to know what her name was because all she had was a couple videos on Twitter and Instagram, and then everybody was chanting her name, but she was at the top of the ramp. Like, people like they were absolutely invested in who she was. Same thing with week 1. It did not say American Dragon, I believe, on Daniel Bryan's or Bryan Danielson's kind of entrance video behind him. Week 2, it did because they referenced him that way and fans knew him as the American Dragon. And so and kind of dealing with that. And then also Bryan Danielson, like that's who he was. And so he was at WWE for as long as he was, and then went to this other promotion, and he still has name recognition with his previous ring name. Like, why would you mess with that? Like, still, I get it. Like you said, it's the trademark and stuff like that, but like they've built the following. It's kind of like Piper Niven and Dewdrop, which give me a fucking break there. But like, it's like, I get that you want to own some of this, and Keith, big suplex there from Bryan off the top rope. And so, yeah, but just, it's almost nutty. And we've, discussed the naming piece before, but yeah, it's really, it's almost stupid to a degree, but we get it. It's the trademark, but yeah, it's just, I don't get it either. So we're getting to the conclusion here too. We got at least I've had a few ads pop up too. So I'm at 23.
My guess is what's your timestamp?
23, 33, 34, 35.
Okay, I'm going to pause for 10 seconds. I'm a little ahead of you.
So 23:40, here we go. And 23:45, here we go.
Okay, we're the exact same now.
So we got both guys, which expect some ads. So Tom and I are watching the stream separately here. You got Steamboat counting. He's at 8, I believe. Yep. Both guys finally getting up at this point. Physical here with chops and things happening. Yep. Absolutely.
I'll tell you, I would have loved to have seen the Daniel Bryan, Shawn Michaels match in WWE.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Sean was like, yeah, we talked about it. It wasn't an interesting story. It was just teacher versus student. That's been done before.
Big rollback. Yep.
I would have loved it for a couple of reasons. I mean, they're two of my all-time favorites. I think it would have tore down the house. And the other thing too is, when have you ever seen Sean in the ring with somebody smaller? Yep. I mean, maybe he worked X-Pac. I mean, I know he worked X-Pac, but I'm just like, it's just so rare. So it would have been a much different type of match. It would. I think it would have been awesome.
Got like a half crab now here. Punk on Danielson. Well, the other one too that I would have loved to have seen was Shawn Michaels and Gargano. And so, because they had the ab off for who could get the most abs in like a few weeks time period, which I think they both were more jacked than you and I will ever be. When they're focusing on that shit and that's all they do all day, like I get it. And so they kind of had a little bit there, which would have been fun to kind of see that and kind of what happened. But, and that's over the years, and maybe in a few years we'll know, we will know, like just what were the missed, pulling of the triggers, Like, I'd love to just, look at that, like the top missed pulled triggers of, WWE's history, whether it was, the Finn or something like that, or, Finn and AJ, or, really like Shinsuke and AJ and not going big on that, or just, the separate universe where Roman is not the guy that's constantly being pushed. Like, I don't get it.
So let me give you two thoughts on this. You say, what are the biggest missed opportunities of WWE over, the last 10 years, 20 years? Let me tell you exactly what it is. And I'm going to cite the perfect example. 2 count there. The biggest missed opportunity is too many times they haven't just put the fucking rockets.
Wait a minute. What's going on here?
He just tapped.
He just tapped out. He's tapping out. Yeah.
Wow.
Look
tapped
at that.
out quick.
Tapped out quick. Yeah. Look at that.
And now we cut to a Kevin Steen.
A young Kevin Steen. Yeah. That's funny.
Well, let me
finish your point. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me close the loop on this, and then we'll get into the aftermath. So great match, by the way. So they need to just put the fucking rocket strap on someone. Okay. Yep. WWE, when they make someone the guy, they become the guy. Okay. And we talked about this with Bret Hart. You gave him a shitty title win. You took it off against Yoko. You did the Hogan stuff. You put him versus Isaac Yankem. You didn't just make him the guy. And Bret could have been an even bigger star than he was. Austin, WrestleMania, crowning, he's your guy. The Rock was made the guy. Shawn at one point was made the guy. Hogan, obviously the guy. Warrior, he was given almost a year to be the guy. Savage was given a year to be the guy. And they become megastars for the rest of their career. I mean, these guys that were made the guy, they're legends. Taker, Shawn, Rock, Austin, Hogan, Warrior, Savage. All these guys we're mentioning, they were made the guy. So what have they done in the last 20 years? They've said, it's not about the guy. Okay. It's about the brand. It's about WWE. It's like the NFL saying it's about the shield, right? So, which is the NFL logo. So here's the deal. We don't have any megastars. Now, what have they done with Roman over the past year? They said, we're just going to make him the fucking guy, whether you like it or not. We're going to make him a heel. You're going to boo the shit out of him. And guess what? He's the biggest star they have. He's the only superstar they have on the current roster. He main events almost every pay-per-view, and they're great matches, and we love them because they made him the guy. But you didn't do it with McIntyre. You didn't do it with Lashley. You didn't do it with Rollins. You didn't do it with Owens. You didn't do it with Ambrose. And we can just go down the list. Should they have all been the guy? Of course not. But you got to make somebody the guy at some point. Even with Cena, you made him the guy, and guess what? He can show up and pop a rating and fill stadiums and main event shows for the rest of his career because you made him the guy at one point. And he would have been a bigger star probably if they made him a heel, but regardless. So you got to make guys the guy.
Yep.
And AEW's been willing to do that, obviously. Omega's the guy. Jericho was the guy. They're going to keep making people. So that's it. Let's get into the aftermath.
Oh, it's time for the aftermath.
What'd you think?
Okay.
And by the way, am I wrong with what I just said?
No, you're not. Absolutely not. And we've talked about a lot on strapping the rocket and stuff like that. And it's just committing. And even if you commit to a story for 6-8 weeks and it doesn't work, like read the room.
Sure. Like, that's the same with, you're exactly right. It's the same with storylines, right?
Yep. And it fails. Hey, it fails. Okay, fine. Then try something different. Or put some new people in there. But even like some of the gimmicks that they do, you can see it's a rehashing of just everyone. Like, just stupid. But okay. So focusing on this and kind of what happened, we'll talk that it was actually CM Punk then after this. So Daniel Bryan getting CM Punk to tap out. But then we get into CM Punk taking on who at the time was the Ring of Honor World Champion Samoa Joe. It was actually three big matches that these guys kind of played out to. So start with one. It was June 12th. It was the World Title Classic. The first match, it was a 60-minute time limit draw where neither could pin each other. And then you had a October 16th. This was Punk versus Joe 2. They did a second 60-minute draw. And this was at the time, this was a 5-star Meltzer match. It was, and so here's the kind of, and you'll know this, but it was the first match in North America to receive a 5-star rating in 7 years. Of course, the last one previous to this being the Shawn Michaels Undertaker Bad Blood in Your House 1997 match. So Tom, again, trivia time, because it's been a while. We had this match in 2004. What was the next I will say, what was the next North American? It was in WWE 5-star match.
Oh, it was Punk Cena, right?
It was Punk Cena. And then do you know what WWE match was the next one to get a 5-star rating?
I don't know, but I bet it was a NXT match.
There has not been a main roster WWE 5-star match since CM Punk Cena at Money in the Bank in 2011. There have been multiple NXTs.
Okay. So that's what I thought. So let me ask you this. Is there any match over the past 9 years on the main roster that should have been 5 stars that wasn't?
None that jumped to mind.
Dude, I got to tell you, and I could be completely wrong, but just top of my mind as we're discussing this, I feel like the best main roster match in the past 9 years was Reigns Lesnar, where Rollins cashed in.
I would say that
was a fucking phenomenal match. And then the cash in was just like, holy shit. I think that was like the best thing that I can remember over the past 9 years. I could be wrong, but top of my head, that's the one that comes to mind.
I think the only one that comes to my mind would have been the Cena AJ SummerSlam 2016 match.
Okay.
That's the only one that I think could even have come close to put for a 5-star on that one. And so I'm actually curious. And so I'm gonna look real quick. 1996. That match got the AJ Cena match got I can get there.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the other dude. Let me actually. Hey, I wanted to bring this up, and I mentioned Lesnar. You understand that Lesnar is one of the best of all time.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
If you said, hey, to me, the greatest of all time are Austin, Rock, Hogan, Flair, and Lesnar. Like if you put him in that, and let's just say, if you put him in your top 5 all time, I have zero argument. Incredible matches, longevity, basically a main eventer for everything he's ever done. Some classic matches. You watch his matches, the way he sells and the pop he still gets. I just think sometimes he is, I will say, I think he, in a lot of ways, is the most underrated wrestler ever. And I know that sounds absurd. He is like, if you think he's the greatest of all time, I'm actually not going to, I wouldn't argue with you. That's how good I think he is. But what I was going to say is his AJ Styles match, his Daniel Bryan match, like some of those were awesome. The only issue they had is there was no build to them because that was that stupid Raw versus SmackDown bullshit.
Yeah, and I'm sure there will be people that disagree with that, but absolutely.
It's an opinion, but that's
and he does there was some time there where he's getting overexposed, and I wasn't a big fan of him either at that point. But at the same time, there have been times where they reel it back in, and like he was gone for a bit, and now he's been getting pops nonstop. So yeah, but
that's another thing to put on his resume. When he's a heel, he's a great heel. When he's a baby face, he's an awesome baby.
He's an awesome baby face. Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. So we've got this 5-star, we had the Punk versus Joe 2, a 60-minute time. We've had 2 60-minute time limit draws. And then the third match, it was December 4th, 2004. It was All-Star Extravaganza or Ring of Honor All-Star Extravaganza 2. There was no time stipulation on this one. And Joe ended up beating Punk. So, You actually had him getting a tryout match. It was May 9th, 2005, aired the next week. His debut tryout was against Val Venus on Sunday Night Heat, which that was in May, and then him accepting a deal with the WWE in June. And so like he accepted the deal, but then he also wrestled a little bit more in Ring of Honor at that point. He had a match with against Austin Aries at that point too. And so kind of playing up the storyline of him taking the belt with him to WWE, which we've seen that before, but that way, especially that would have been fun to see under those circumstances and kind of how that was going. They actually called it the Summer of Punk at that point too. And actually, we'll come back to this in the Steamboat piece, like Foley actually appearing a little bit and convincing Punk to defend the title on the way out. So Mick Foley starting to get involved in this, but we'll come back to that. And so, so again, had him, some matches on the way out as well as against Colt Cabana, just some good stuff. But then having his final match, it was August, and then in September of that year, ended up going down to OVW, so Ohio Valley. So we will spend some time talking about that later. But yeah, so just interesting. So, Daniel Bryan ended up having some matches against Austin Aries. They actually it was a 74-minute match that Austin Aries ended up winning. Yeah, that would be the longest one, even with the restart with Brett. Like that still is a very long match. And so it ended up actually winning the company's inaugural Survival of the Fittest tournament in 2004. Again, this was Bryan. Kind of a mixed reporting here on he left for a little bit, took some time off, they said, but it also said that he had some dates in Europe and Japan. And so mixed reporting. Was it storyline why he left, or was it because he was legitimately wanted to, who knows? But anyway, so we got that kind of going for him. And so, winning though the Ring of Honor World Championship, it was Glory by Honor 4. That was in September of 2005. And then really just having a lot of successful title defenses. Actually, there was some crossover with CZW Combat Zone Wrestling, him and Chris Hero having a match as well too. Just some different stuff. And so, again, just being successful. Steamboat, actually, I wanted to make sure to include him because I included him on the front half. I wanted to talk about him on the back half too. He actually feuded with Mick Foley in Ring of Honor. So they brought Foley in. You've got him feuding with Foley as well too. And actually, there was and this is actually a good little storyline here. They were debating over which wrestling style was superior, pure wrestling or hardcore wrestling. And so they had some kind of matches where they were managers. The two of them never actually got involved themselves. But it was his last appearance. Steamboat's last appearance was Ring of Honor Final Battle 2004. Foley was there as well too. The superstars, legends made peace at that point, if you will. And never having a match. I'm sure at the time, if we had been watching, it would have been one that we really would have wanted. But who knows? So, but still, that's a good kind of storyline how they play it out. So, I did manage to find some reviews here. You had CM Punk was 89 on PWI this year. Wow. The American Dragon was 77. So, and this was the PW Torch. I could not find anything in the Observer newsletter on this one, but Bryan Danielson beat CM Punk via tap out at 26-10. Steamboat refereed, which upset Punk. Really good submission-based match with Punk adding good selling and personality to Danielson's grinding approach. Good history to the various submissions, as pointed out by the commentator, added to the match on video. Very realistic and absorbing with a few bursts of energy that really worked. Afterwards, Steamboat arm dragged a complaining Punk and his partner Colt Cabana out of the ring, which is 4 1/4 stars. This was the Danielson Punk match was probably the best match of the show. Punk is not the promotion's top worker. His character is so effective because he is an old-fashioned chicken shit heel in a promotion that doesn't have chicken shit heels. Punk's facial expressions after getting dumped out of the ring by Steamboat were outstanding and a perfect blend of astonishment and fear. And so Punk was a standout personality on the show in 4 areas. His entertaining commentary, which had more intelligence and edge than most color guys in wrestling. His initial reaction was Steamboat in the Cabana match, his excellent performance in the Danielson style match, and his reactions to Steamboat's signature arm drags at the end of the show. I really liked this match more than I should have because it was so intense, believable, and logically advanced. And so, like, so 4.25 stars, so like fairly high marks for this compared to some stuff we've seen. Like I said, it was a very technical match, but you had the styles kind of contrasting as well too. Tom, I'll go first on this one. If I never know what to give it, I'm going to stick with a 7.5 on this one. Because we're synced up, man.
We pick the same score every week. It's so annoying.
I know, and we catch shit for this online.
7.5. 7.5 is what I had.
We never coordinate. I do want people to know that. It's the one thing we leave out of our notes. Like that section of the notes we never touch.
We do not have a writing team writing us scripts. This is a total shoot.
And so feel free. And some people think we vote too high, like whatever. We don't give enough low scores. Like, watch this match yourself and tell me if it's a low score. But overall, like I said, it was really, and it's hard I don't want to score it lower because this really is not the guys we know today. Very different in that sense. And so, good for us to kind of see, but part of it is like, we don't get to see them wrestle this style much anymore because part of it's because they're not allowed to. Like we've seen flashes of it with Danielson lately because he's been allowed to do some of that stuff. And so, don't always get that. So I've been, I'm very happy, very impressed, all that good stuff. But yeah, 7.5 for me.
I got the same, man. A good match. I mean, it wasn't like the greatest match ever, but it was a really solid match. A lot of fun. I mean, these two guys, it was fun watching some ROH. And, again, the actual storyline, nothing like out of this world. But, again, that's what I think is cool about what we do is we talk in historical sense. So we're not just talking about the here and now, but we're also saying, okay, in 2021, these two guys are both active and they're both in the same promotion and they may tear down the house at some point. The story between these two isn't over. So it's cool to watch that with everything that we've seen since, the matches we've seen since, the fact we may get another one. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. Well, and you talk about historic and, kind of or historical tendencies and kind of what's played out as well, too. I do want to remind our listeners, of course, that historically, while you may have not manscaped, that can stop today. Like, we want you to start a new history, turn the page in the chapter, in the book, and begin a new history with just manscaped, man garden balls, just your bits, whatever you want to call it, like, the berries to your twig, that we want guys out there and women out there as well too. Holidays are approaching. Get it in now. One way, more than one way. Place your order, manscaped.com. Use our code payoff20. That's payoff20 at manscaped.com for free shipping and 20% off. It's absolutely worth it. Just a slew of products. I actually just yesterday used my 4.0 lawnmower. Got to clean myself up a little bit too. And so I'm excited about that. And so as always, like start that new trend. The holidays are approaching. At Christmas dinner, you don't want to be sitting there uncomfortable. Thanksgiving, especially too, no matter how you celebrate, we want you to have just like, look great and feel great with Payoff 20, free shipping, 20% off at manscaped.com.
You'll swim faster. You'll have better sex. You'll look all that when you look at yourself in the mirror.
You flex a little bit harder.
Sweat less.
Yep. Yeah.
Why? I don't know why you wouldn't.
Oh, right. Absolutely. So it's worth it. So, all right. Sounds good. How'd you dipped your toe in the Ring of Honor pool here? You feeling good about this?
I do. I want to watch more of it, man. I really, really enjoyed it. And I'd share more, but I'm going to piss myself if we don't finish recording so I can go to the bathroom.
Let's wrap it up and go home. All right.
All right. Well, fun episode. Enjoyed it. We covered a lot of ground this morning, my friend.
We did, but good stuff.
Hope you enjoy it. We'll see you next week on an all new episode of The Payoff.